Hey there, YouTube. Welcome to Big Mike Beard Wisdom. So today, we're working on the Gambler again, and this is a 2003 Acura TL Type S. And today, we'll be taking a look under the hood, kind of checking for anything that looks like it's going to be a big red flag. So we're looking for the state of the rubber components, we're looking for any major leaks, looking for wetness drips coming down. We're also looking for anywhere where there's just, maybe it's just simple seepage that can just be wiped off and cleaned. And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a little bit better picture of what we need for the car. So with the car market the way it is, a lot of people are buying used cars, a lot of people are selling used cars. The new cars are going for a premium. And it's one of those things where some people are looking at cars and maybe they don't know what they're looking at. I'm hoping I can give you a little bit of idea today. Because sometimes when you get into cars, it's kind of like the song. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Is it know when to walk away and know when to run? So the TL Type S, very tempting. Certain things with it, not very tempting. Other things with it, I'm about ready to run. One of the first things you may notice is that I've got wood blocks here. So this hood is super heavy and uses gas struts. So it definitely needs a set of gas struts, depending on where the car situation lands. So whether or not this is a keeper or whether or not this is a, run away from it one. Even if I was going to flip it, I would definitely replace these, because nothing like grabbing a piece of wood to go show someone a car and then being like, hey, what's that? So once I slide underneath a little bit more, I have to try and figure out what's going on. I'm willing to bet it's probably whatever that oil leak situation is. There might be stuff up top leaking. So from up top, you don't really see a lot of stuff leaking. It looks mostly dry from up top. Little rusty. Kind of dirty in some spots. So looks like that right there. There might be a little bit like a valve cover, cam seal kind of thing going on there. Should take this cover off to take a quick peek. So with that cover removed, a little bit better view of things. Power steering pump's a little wet. That might just be a bunch of seepage though. And also, if you go to do the timing belt, you've got to take this loose. So it's one of those things where if anything was done for that recently, that's why it's going to be dirty, especially if they didn't clean it off. So this side looks fairly dry. Now we'll get a little bit better view than we had before. So you can kind of see the valve covers are a little dirty. And then it kind of goes up and over that probably cam seal, I would assume. This side looks to be about the same. So not a bad leak, maybe just a bunch of seepage. Now, as I was getting ready to put that last little cover thing back on, I did notice this. So that bright green is probably AC dye. And a lot of times you add AC dye, anytime you put like an air conditioning system and you add oil, you always want to add just a touch of dye. A lot of times there's dye already in the oils. So it all kind of depends on how you wind up doing it. But that little bit of bright shiny there might be a not so great sign for the AC system, or the AC system might be okay. It's just dirty from the last time and nobody cleaned it off. So AC wise, you want to try and see if you can find a service port, and it's handy if you have a set of gauges. If you don't have a set of gauges, if you've got like one of those like AC recharge cans, a lot of times those will have a gauge on it. You just have to find whatever port it hooks onto, and all you want to do is hook it up and see if it reads pressure. So if you have pressure in the system, then it means that more than likely you've got a good charge in there, because not too many people are charging these things up with air. But if it's got pressure in there, it means that you don't have a bad enough leak that's completely empty. If it's completely empty, then you really don't even want to run your AC compressor, because there's a slight chance that you're running moist air through it, and moist air is not the friend of an AC compressor. So as long as you have pressure, you're probably okay. If you don't know how to diagnose the pressure, a lot of them will kind of tell you how to do that. But the big thing that I kind of wish is that I had one of those cans handy. Just so I could see how much pressure's in here, because now I'm curious. So just taking a quick peek in through the grill. Looks relatively all right. The fins that are bent over are kind of common, so that happens over time. You can go through and clean that up if you want. And you can either use just a simple like pocket screwdriver, straighten them one at a time, or you can go and buy like a fin brush, and it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit faster. All right, now for the nasty stuff. So, look underneath here. There's a bit of oil there, some oil there, and there. And then this is where the engine meets the transmission. So could be talking rear main seal kind of stuff here. There's also common leak on Hondas from like a O-ring up above that. And then over here, just below the starter, looks like a ground cable. So when people say, hey, the reason why your car's not starting might be a cable, that's going to be kind of why. You can see it's frayed and corroded pretty good. So you're probably getting a lot of extra resistance on this one. And not a bad idea to replace it. Being like this won't 100% stop the vehicle from starting, but it's definitely not good. Radiator stuff seems to look okay. So this O2 sensor looks like this would be probably like the rear O2 sensor, because you've got this pipe coming from the rear head, this pipe coming from the front head, they merge here, and then the O2 sensor's there. Now when these get kind of oily and covered up like that, they can start having issues, because they do need to have some reference to outside air, and when they get coated, they can start having problems. And then on the TL, they have a HVAC drain that comes down, and in earlier models, it leaks down here on this rear subframe and causes it to rust out. I think this one's in good shape from the look of it. Probably doing part to the oil. But they also probably had some sort of update or change that they probably did correctly, because I think they were supposed to reroute where the drain went, and from looking at it, I would say we're in good shape here. Then this axle seal here, so there's the axle going in the tranny. That looks good. That one might be dirty, but it might be that rear main kind of thing that's going on right where the engine and tranny meet up. That's actually leaking. Can I get a good view of this? So you can kind of see up in there on the engine, up in there, that's a little dirty, but it looks like this sensor here, or whatever that is that's sticking out, might be leaking, because that looks almost at the highest point of an oil leak that's coming down, which I'm thinking is this stuff right here. So I'll have to look into what that sensor is. I'm assuming some type of oil pressure sensor, and then get that cleaned off really good. That way I can see and verify that it's actually where it's leaking from, and not just from the air blowing oil filter mess up. But otherwise, it looks relatively decent down here. Well, spoke too soon. Something looks like it's leaking over that way. Let's take a look up from the battery. So first of all, this is a marine battery. It's kind of interesting. So I've got it set the charger on right now because the battery's kind of dead. It's not super dead, just dead enough it won't start at the moment. It does trigger the starter. So having that cable down there looking pretty rough isn't super great. This stuff here looking a little green isn't super great either. So you can see negative cable here, comes down here, goes into there, and then that goes down to the wire that we saw that was all frayed and green. Then other stuff to take a peek at. Brake stuff looks pretty good. Fluid's very dark. But it's not leaking, which is always a plus. Same thing with the brake work over here. So these lines look good. They're starting to develop a little bit of like that white, like the stuff underneath, but not bad. A lot of times areas like this, where you've got a clip, can hold a lot of that rust in, so you will have no idea that it's super rusty in there until you move that clip, and then you'll realize that, hey, you know, all that salt, all the rust, all the moisture and stuff like that just sits and lives in there. So that's kind of a big area to check. All right, so coolant reservoir. That is almost an indeterminate color coolant. But it does have some funk on it. So probably definitely needs a coolant flush. It's not milky like it's oily. So again, radiator cap, it's got some funk in there. So it probably definitely needs flushed, changed out. And this would be one of those situations where I'd probably flush it more than once. So I'd probably flush it, run it all like summerish or something like that, and then right before winter, flush it again. That way I'm moving all as much of that junk out as possible. Smells like good coolant though. Little things like this crack here and the one there, that might be indicative maybe it took a hit in the front. But I think the front's relatively all right. Power steering looks okay. At least it has plenty of fluid for the moment. And probably lastly, you can always fire it up and listen to it a little bit more than when you would have first checked the car out. You're listening for any kind of weird noises, any kind of loud tappings, any knocks, any squeals, watching for any steam or smoke. Now the nice thing about older cars is that they'll have throttle cables that you can grab and mess with under the hood. The newer stuff will have probably a throttle by wire, in which case you'll be stuck with doing it with your foot. In which case I'd recommend having a buddy do it. That way you can be outside listening to it while the buddy revs it up. But if you're in a situation where you can't get to the throttle cable to mess with it when you're underneath the hood to listen for anything weird, you can always have a friend sit inside the car and rev it for you. Hold it at a certain RPM if you want, while you're outside listening to it. That way, you're able to hear it more closely, as opposed to being all the way inside going, "Did you hear that noise? Where'd that come from?" And then popping it out, back and forth. If you've got a really cool scan tool, you could probably hook it into a car as well, and you might be able to adjust it. That way it holds this particular RPM. But, real quick, let's just blow the carbon out. So this is mostly for the drivetrain, checking for leaks, so anything visually that makes sense. This isn't actually digging into, hey, what happens when I read that check engine light? That's going to be later. And then keep your list running, because you may find more things as you keep going. The more you look at the car, the more you may notice more things that you want to fix, or things that you should note. We also kind of see that there's an oil leak, so really what we need to do is we need to spray it down and get the engine kind of cleaned up a good bit. That way we can further try and figure out where the leaks are coming from. Because if it is a rear main seal, that means either the engine or tranny's got to get out in order to do it, which is going to be a fair amount of time. And for some people, just that aspect might be something where, hey, it's time to walk away. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to like and subscribe. I'll check you next time. Of course, then again, some people just like a winter beater. Car that's leaking, but it still goes. It's got heat, maybe not AC, and can get you from point A to point B.